Hello friendos, it's Bella from the Bookish Badger, and today I'm going to be doing a summer reading wrap-up. So I only read 5 books this summer, and you might say, what, only 5 books? But give me a second to explain. So I was in this competition. It's like an interlibrary trivia competition, and there's 5 books that you have to read, and then you get like quizzed with trivia questions on those books. We got the books in, I want to say, April, and the competition was in August. So basically that whole time I didn't want to clutter my mind with any other facts or trivia or things from any other books, so I just read these books. But I did read them all twice, and one of them I read 3 times, so technically I read 11 books. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So the first book I read was Bone Gap by Laura Ruby, and I couldn't really figure out what it was about by the synopsis. I was like, well, this sounds realistic, and like it takes place in a normal world, but also magic shows up, but it's not exactly fantasy. Well, I found out there's this cute little genre named magical realism, and I did not know that existed before this, and this is that. It's about these 2 brothers, Sean and Finn, and one day this Polish girl named Rosa mysteriously appears in their barn. But then one day she disappears just as mysteriously as she appeared. At least that's what the whole town thinks, but Finn believes she was kidnapped. The book is told from 5 different perspectives, but mostly from Finn and Rosa's. Now, when I first read the synopsis, I thought it sounded pretty boring. I didn't really get what was going on, and then I read it. I don't know how to explain to you how good it is, but it's really good, and I highly recommend it. Just the character descriptions and character development and how well thought out the characters are alone is worth reading this book. The whole book is filled with lively and intriguing descriptions of everything, and especially the characters. It's really good. It may be a little slow to start for some, but I promise you it is worth it. I personally gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. The second book I read this summer was Noggin by John Corey Whaley. I wouldn't say it's bad per se, I just wouldn't call it great. Now, the concept is really cool. It's basically about this teenager named Travis, and he gets cancer and dies. It's not as bad as it sounds. That's not a spoiler, I promise. Because where the concept of this book really comes in is that he gets his head cryogenically frozen before he dies. And lo and behold, 5 years later, they figure out that technology and he comes back to life. But the thing is, in his perspective, everything is 5 years into the future. His girlfriend, his friend, his parents have all been living for 5 years while he comes back to life, and he's still the same 17-year-old kid that he was. And that sounds like such a cool concept, but it wasn't played out as well as I would have liked it to be. Like I said, it did not suck. It was just not as good as I really wanted it to be. In my opinion, the biggest problem with this book was an annoying main character, and one side character in particular was annoying too. I'm talking about Travis, who is not only the main character but the narrator, and Kate, who was his girlfriend when he died. Overall, I gave this book a 3-star on Goodreads, and I wouldn't dismiss John Corey Whaley's other works. I think it's just that this one in particular was not for me. The third book I read this summer was I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. Wow, did I love this book. Now, I have a full review of this on my channel, which I will link down below, but basically it's about these twins named Noah and Jude, and the book is told from their perspectives separately in different times. Noah has the past and Jude has the present. And when you're looking at Noah's points of view, him and Jude are best friends, they're great brother and sister, but by the time it gets to Jude's parts, they're not talking anymore, and the whole book is this puzzle of trying to figure out what happened between Noah's and Jude's perspectives. Like I said, to get my full thoughts, I have a full review, but basically I loved it, I adored it. It's actually one of my new all-time favorites. It's probably in the top 5, I would have to say, and obviously I gave it a 5-star on Goodreads. Now this is the one out of the 5 that I read 3 times, but the 3rd time I read it, it was actually an audiobook format. I was reading along with it and listening to it on audiobook, and that was really cool. I had never really listened to audiobooks before then. I have a vague memory of listening to audiobooks in the car when I was little, but I also remember not liking it because I got car sick unless I listened to music. So that kind of made me stay away from audiobooks for the longest time because I just had this stigma attached to it. But it was really enjoyable. There were a couple of characters' voices that I disagreed with, if that makes sense, but overall it was a really good experience, and now I'm looking forward to trying out other audiobooks. Anyway, that's enough for this one. On to the next book. The 4th book I read was The Young Elites by Marie Lu. I was surprised at how much I didn't like this book. Again, I didn't hate it. The thing with this is that it was really boring and really slow for the first 2/3 of the book. But then the last third, it got all hepped up and everything was happening, and then it got really exciting. Enough so that it made me want to read the other ones in the series, so that's exciting. It takes place in this sort of medieval fantasy type land, and it's about this girl named Adelina who was marked by a fever that went around the whole country when she was little. Marked, that means they got weird scars or different hair color or eye color or all these odd things. Anybody who was marked was considered lower than and not good enough and a disgrace to the family. But a certain number of the kids who were marked got these fantastical powers along with the sickness, and those kids are called the elites. So this is Adelina's journey into finding out she's an elite, dealing with her powers, dealing with everything that comes along with it. A lot of life and death decisions go on in this book. It sounded really cool. I thought this was going to be the one that I enjoyed the most out of the 5. I had heard so many good things from my friends about Legend and Marie Lu's other works, but this one just didn't hit the mark for me for the most part. Again, I will not discount her other writing. I'm still totally going to read Legend, don't worry, because even my friends who read this book said, oh, Legend was so much better. So I'm looking forward to that. But this book, for me, most of it was a 2.5 to 3-star rating, but by the end I bumped up my Goodreads rating to 4 stars. And the last book I read this summer, book number 5, was I Hunt Killers by Barry Lyga, and whew, was this ever scary. Again, with the really cool concept with this one. Basically, it's about this kid named Jazz, and his dad is the most notorious serial killer to ever live. His dad is in jail now, but in the tiny town that Jazz lives in, murders start popping up, so Jazz is determined to figure out who it is. I get scared easily. I know I get scared easily, but I was still intrigued by this because I like mysteries and I like solving mysteries in books and I think it's so much fun. But oh my goodness, this was terrifying. It wasn't just the blood and the gore and the terrifying graphic ways that people were killed in this book, which there is a lot of. But that's not even the scariest part. The scariest part was being in the mind of a serial killer, in Jazz's dad's head, and in even Jazz's head, who kind of thinks like a serial killer because he was raised by his dad his whole life and his dad wants him to go into the family business, shall we say. I personally do not like being in that headspace, that scary, scary headspace, but I have friends who really enjoyed this book. It was one of their favorite books out of the 5. I personally didn't even end up giving it any starred rating on Goodreads because the thing is, it was a good book. Make no mistake. Even though I was terrified out of my wits the whole time I was reading it, I felt physically ill by the end of reading it. I liked it. I even put the second book on my to-read list, which I'm probably not going to get to for a million years. It's way at the bottom of my to-read list, but it's still there. Even though I was so terrified, I wanted to know what happened enough so that I put the next one on my to-read list. But on the other hand, if I had given it a star rating, I would have given it a 1-star rating because I was so scared. But since it was such a good book, I didn't want to bring down the overall rating of the book just because I was scared, so I didn't end up giving it a rating. So I am just so confused by this book, but one thing I know for sure is that I never want to be in a room alone, or in a room period, with Barry Lyga, the author. I don't know what goes through his head, but it's scary. So that is it for my summer reading wrap-up. If you read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them. Let me know what you read this summer and what your favorite book of the summer was. Or if you even just want to say hello, any of it, please leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, do not hesitate to give it a thumbs up. Do not hesitate to subscribe for more content coming soon, and I will see you in the next video. Bookish Badger, signing off.